You were never the one who got away by accident. You were the blessing they failed to recognize while it was standing right in front of them. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how some people only realize your value after you've completely disappeared from their reach? Isn't it amazing how confidence can blind someone into making the biggest mistake of their life? They thought they had endless chances with you. They believed your kindness would always be available. They assumed your loyalty had no expiration date. But what they didn't understand is that God's gifts are never meant to be taken for granted. And now, as they look back, it's actually embarrassing how badly they fumbled someone who prayed for them, believed in them, supported them, forgave them, and genuinely wanted the best for them. They had something rare in their hands, yet they treated it like it was ordinary. Family, if this message is speaking directly to your spirit, stay with me until the very end, because what God is about to reveal will explain why you were removed from situations that once broke your heart. It wasn't your loss, it was their greatest missed opportunity. Sometimes, God doesn't expose people by punishing them immediately. Sometimes He simply lets them live long enough to realize what they threw away. That's a judgment many never recover from. See, chosen one, the painful part wasn't that they rejected you. The painful part was that they never recognized who was standing before them. They judged you by your quiet seasons instead of your future destiny. They laughed when heaven was preparing to elevate you. They criticized your process without realizing they were watching a masterpiece still being painted. Isn't that exactly how people treated David before he became king? They saw a shepherd, while God saw a ruler. They saw an ordinary young man, while heaven had already written history with his name on it. The same thing has happened to many of you listening today. They underestimated your wisdom because you weren't loud. They overlooked your loyalty because betrayal had become normal to them. They ignored your peace because they were addicted to chaos. They walked away thinking they could always replace you. But God doesn't create copies of His chosen. There is only one you. Your heart is unique. Your purpose is unique. Your calling is unique. And once they lost access to that, they realized that everyone else they chased could imitate your presence, but could never replace your spirit. That's why they're confused now. They thought happiness would come after losing you, but instead, they found emptiness. They thought someone else would love them better, understand them better, or support them better. But comparison became their prison because nobody carried what God placed inside you. That realization is far more painful than any argument they ever had with you. What's even more embarrassing is that many of them are pretending they don't regret it, while secretly replaying every memory in their minds. Pride is forcing them to smile in public, while regret is eating them alive in private. They scroll through your life hoping to find signs that you're struggling, yet every blessing God places over you reminds them of the opportunity they wasted. They hear your name and become uncomfortable. They see your growth and suddenly remember every conversation they dismissed. Why? Because truth eventually catches up with everyone. You never had to prove your worth. Time did it for you. God did it for you. Your consistency did it for you. Your healing did it for you. Your peace became evidence that their opinion was never your identity. Isn't it interesting how people can ignore a diamond while it's covered in dust, but suddenly want it after it's been polished? But by then, it's no longer available. Chosen one, don't ever feel guilty for becoming unavailable to those who repeatedly dishonored your presence. You gave chances, you showed mercy, you extended grace, you prayed for restoration. But there comes a moment when God closes a door that no amount of human regret can reopen. That's not revenge, that's divine protection. God knows that if He allowed certain people back into your life, they would interrupt the blessings He has prepared for your next season. Now here's what I really want you to understand, because this is where many chosen ones struggle. Stop asking yourself why they couldn't see your value. The question isn't why they missed it. The question is why you kept trying to convince people of something God had already confirmed. You don't need everyone to celebrate your calling. You don't need everyone's approval to walk in your purpose. Even Jesus wasn't accepted by everyone around him. Some people will only appreciate you after they've lost access to you forever. And that's not your responsibility to fix. Your assignment was never to make people understand your worth. Your assignment was to remain faithful while God revealed it through your life. And look at you now. You're stronger than the version they abandoned. You're wiser than the version they underestimated. You're more peaceful than the version they tried to manipulate. Every tear became strength. Every betrayal became wisdom. Every lonely night became preparation. Every rejection became redirection. The very pain they caused became the training ground where God built your confidence. They accidentally pushed you closer to your purpose. Imagine how embarrassing that is. They tried to break you, but instead, they activated the person God always intended you to become. They thought they were ending your story when they were actually introducing your next chapter. So don't waste another day hoping they'll apologize or finally understand what they lost. Whether they admit it or not changes nothing about what God is doing in your life. Heaven isn't waiting for their approval before blessing you. Your destiny isn't delayed because someone misjudged you. In fact, sometimes the greatest confirmation that you're truly chosen is watching people realize too late what they carelessly let slip through their fingers. Keep walking with confidence. Keep protecting your peace. Keep honoring God in everything you do. Keep loving without becoming naive. Keep forgiving without reopening doors God has permanently closed. Remember this whenever doubt tries to creep back into your heart. You were never overlooked by heaven, only underestimated by people. And people can make mistakes, but God never does. One day, many of those who laughed, ignored, dismissed, or replaced you will quietly admit to themselves that losing you was one of the biggest mistakes they ever made. Not because you've become arrogant, but because God has made your life undeniable. So hold your head high, chosen one. The embarrassment belongs to those who couldn't recognize a blessing when it was standing right in front of them. Your story isn't about being rejected. Your story is about being reserved for something greater. God didn't remove you because you lacked value. He removed you because your value was too sacred to remain in the hands of people who never intended to treasure it. And that's why your greatest days are still ahead. Stay faithful, stay humble, stay courageous. Because the God who chose you before the foundation of the world is about to place you in rooms where you will never have to convince anyone of your worth again. They will recognize the light of God on your life immediately, and what others fumbled, heaven will faithfully establish for His glory. Chosen one, have you ever stopped and wondered why some people only realize your value after you've completely disappeared from their lives? Isn't it amazing how people can spend years praying for a blessing only to ignore it once God places it right in front of them? That is exactly what happens when people become spiritually blind. They stop seeing with gratitude and begin seeing with pride. They become so familiar with your presence that they mistake your kindness for weakness, your patience for dependence, and your loyalty for something that will never run out. They convince themselves that you will always be there no matter how they treat you. They think they have unlimited chances, unlimited opportunities, and unlimited access to someone God never intended them to take for granted. But hear me carefully, because this is where everything changes. God never gives His chosen ones to people so they can be used, ignored, or disrespected forever. He allows people to experience the blessing, but when they consistently refuse to honor it, He removes it. And when He removes it, they finally begin to understand what they lost. By then, it's too late. Some of you listening today have spent nights asking yourself, why couldn't they see my heart? Why didn't they appreciate everything I did? Why did they choose everyone else over me? But I want to shift your perspective today. The problem was never that you lacked value. The problem was that they lacked the spiritual maturity to recognize value. Not everyone has the vision to recognize a blessing while they still have it. Some people only understand your importance after your absence begins speaking louder than your presence ever did. Isn't that incredible? While you were there encouraging them, supporting them, praying for them, believing in them, forgiving them, and standing beside them through difficult seasons, they overlooked everything you brought into their lives. They focused on what you weren't instead of appreciating everything you were. They searched for flaws in someone who was genuinely trying to love them with a sincere heart. That wasn't your failure. That was their blindness. Remember this, chosen one. People who are driven by pride often mistake consistency for weakness. Because you stayed faithful, they assumed you had nowhere else to go. Because you forgave them, they assumed they could continue hurting you without consequences. Because you remained humble, they assumed you had no confidence. But humility should never be mistaken for a lack of worth. You remained kind because that is who God called you to be, not because you deserved poor treatment. There is a huge difference. Your character reflected heaven even when their behavior reflected immaturity. God saw every sacrifice you made that nobody else noticed. He saw every tear you wiped away in private. He heard every prayer you whispered when your heart was breaking. Nothing escaped his attention. The truth is, many people become so distracted by appearances that they completely overlook substance. They chase excitement while ignoring stability. They admire noise while overlooking wisdom. They celebrate temporary pleasures while rejecting lasting peace. That is why they failed to recognize what God placed in front of them. They were searching for something flashy, while heaven had already given them something priceless. A diamond covered in dust is still a diamond. Its value doesn't disappear simply because someone fails to recognize it. In the same way, your worth never decreased because someone underestimated you. Their opinion never had the authority to redefine what God already established. Chosen one, don't forget how many times you showed up when nobody else did. You were the one who stayed when others walked away. You were the one who believed when everyone else doubted. You were the one who encouraged people even while carrying your own silent battles. Yet instead of appreciating your heart, they became comfortable with your sacrifice. Familiarity can be dangerous because it causes people to overlook miracles they experience every day. They stopped thanking God for your presence because they assumed you would always remain within their reach. They forgot that every blessing comes with responsibility. Every relationship requires honor. Every opportunity requires stewardship. And when people fail to steward God's gifts correctly, God eventually entrusts those gifts to someone else. That's why you shouldn't feel guilty about the separation. Some of you still carry unnecessary guilt, wondering if you should have tried harder or stayed longer. But listen carefully. Love does not mean allowing yourself to be repeatedly dishonored. Kindness does not require accepting constant disrespect. Forgiveness does not mean remaining where God has already told you to leave. Sometimes obedience to God looks like walking away from people who never learned how to value what heaven gave them. That isn't bitterness. That is wisdom. There comes a season when God says, "You've planted enough, you've loved enough, you've forgiven enough. Now it's time to move forward." And when God gives that instruction, your responsibility is not to argue with him, but to trust him. Here's what makes the entire situation so heartbreaking for those who fumbled you. At the time they had access to you, they believed someone better would come along. They believed your absence wouldn't matter. They believed replacing you would be easy. But after enough time passed, reality confronted them. They discovered that loyalty is rare. Genuine love is rare. Peace is rare. Integrity is rare. A heart that sincerely wants to see others succeed is rare. They searched for what you carried in other people, only to realize that what God placed inside you could never be duplicated. They weren't simply looking for another person. They were trying to replace a divine assignment, and that is impossible. God creates originals, not copies. Time has a remarkable way of exposing truth. While they were busy chasing temporary satisfaction, you were quietly growing into the person God created you to become. You didn't waste your energy trying to prove your worth. You allowed God to reveal it through your transformation. You became stronger through your pain, wiser through your disappointments, and more peaceful through your healing. Every season they thought would destroy you became another chapter of preparation. Every rejection became redirection. Every closed door became protection. Every lonely moment became an opportunity for God to shape your character. Now your life reflects a confidence that doesn't come from people accepting you. It comes from knowing that your identity has always been established by God. So if you've been questioning your value because someone failed to appreciate you, let that question end today. Stop measuring your worth by the opinions of people who lacked the discernment to recognize a blessing. You were never ordinary. You were never insignificant. You were never not enough. You were simply placed before people who weren't spiritually prepared to handle what God had entrusted to them. And that is why they fumbled you, not because you lacked value, but because they lacked vision. They confused accessibility with commonness, kindness with weakness, and patience with permanence. Now they are left with memories, while you continue walking toward your God-ordained destiny. Never lower your standards to be accepted by people who cannot recognize your worth. The God who created you has already declared your value, and his opinion will always outweigh the opinions of those who failed to see the treasure standing right in front of them. Walk forward with confidence, chosen one, because what they overlooked, God is about to place in environments where it will be honored, protected, celebrated, and appreciated exactly as heaven intended. Chosen one, here's the part they never saw coming. They believed rejecting you would weaken you. They assumed walking away from you would leave you broken, confused, and desperate for another chance. They expected you to spend your days chasing their approval and questioning your worth. But what they didn't understand was that God has a remarkable way of turning rejection into redirection. What felt like the end of your story was actually heaven introducing you to a brand new chapter. The very door that closed on you was the same door God used to push you toward your destiny. Sometimes we cry over doors that God has already locked, because he knows what waits behind them is not meant to go where he is taking us. If you're listening today and you've ever felt abandoned, overlooked, or left behind, I want you to hear this with your spirit. God was never abandoning you. He was repositioning you. He was removing you from places where your gift was tolerated, so he could lead you into places where your gift would be celebrated. Think about your life for a moment. Some of the greatest lessons you've learned didn't come during seasons of comfort. They came during seasons of disappointment. The nights you cried became the nights you prayed harder than ever before. The moments when people walked away became the moments when you discovered that God had never left your side. Every betrayal forced you to lean more on heaven than on human approval. Every rejection taught you that your identity could never depend on the opinions of people whose vision was limited. Every lonely season became a classroom where God was shaping your character. You thought you were losing people, but in reality, you were losing distractions. You thought your life was falling apart, but God was removing everything that could not survive the next level of your calling. Sometimes God answers our prayers not by adding people into our lives, but by removing the wrong ones. At first it feels painful, it feels unfair, it feels confusing. But later you realize that every goodbye was making room for the blessings that could never fit while you were holding on to what God had already released. The people who underestimated you believed they were writing the final chapter of your story. They thought they had the power to define your future. They assumed that if they ignored you, rejected you, or walked away from you, your purpose would somehow disappear. But no human being has the authority to cancel what God has already ordained. Your calling did not come from people, and it cannot be taken away by people. Before anyone knew your name, God already knew your destiny. Before anyone formed an opinion about you, heaven had already written your assignment. That means no rejection can erase what God has spoken over your life. People may delay your comfort for a season, but they can never delay God's purpose. They may misunderstand your heart, but they cannot rewrite God's plan. They may close one opportunity, but they cannot stop the doors that heaven is preparing to open.
Have you noticed how your greatest growth happened after your greatest heartbreak?
Isn't it incredible that the seasons you wanted to escape became the seasons that built the strongest version of you? If everything had worked out exactly the way you wanted, you might never have discovered the strength that God placed inside you. You might never have learned how resilient your spirit truly was. You might never have realized how powerful your faith could become. But because life became difficult, your relationship with God became deeper. Because people disappointed you, you learned to trust the one who never fails. Because you experienced rejection, you stopped looking for validation from people and started finding your confidence in your Creator. That transformation is priceless. No one can take it from you, because it was forged through experiences that only you and God fully understand.
Now look at where you are today.
You are not the same person you were when they walked away. Your peace is different. Your mindset is different. Your faith is stronger. Your boundaries are healthier. Your discernment is sharper. You no longer confuse attention with love or popularity with purpose. You understand that not everyone who enters your life deserves permanent access to your heart. God taught you that every relationship should produce peace, not constant confusion. Every connection should encourage growth, not endless exhaustion. Every opportunity should move you closer to your purpose, not further away from it. These lessons were expensive, but they were necessary. The pain became your teacher, and the Holy Spirit became your guide.
What makes this so powerful is that the very people who expected your downfall are now witnessing your transformation.
They expected to hear that you had given up. Instead, they see you becoming stronger. They expected you to stay trapped in bitterness. Instead, they see you walking in peace. They expected your confidence to disappear. Instead, they see you carrying yourself with quiet strength and wisdom. Your healing has become a testimony that no argument could ever replace. You don't need to announce that God has been working in your life, because your growth speaks louder than your words. The confidence you carry today isn't pride. It's the result of surviving storms that should have destroyed you, but didn't, because God's hand never left your life.
Chosen one, understand this clearly.
The greatest victory isn't making people regret losing you. The greatest victory is becoming everything God created you to be, regardless of who stayed or who left. If they regret their choices, that's between them and God. Your assignment is not to make them feel guilty. Your assignment is to keep moving forward with humility, gratitude, and unwavering faith. Don't waste your future trying to relive a past that God has already redeemed. Some people will eventually realize they made the biggest mistake of their lives. They will replay old conversations in their minds. They will remember your loyalty, your patience, your encouragement, and your genuine love. They will search for your qualities in other people and discover that what they lost cannot be replaced. But by then, your focus should no longer be on what they missed. Your focus should be on where God is leading you next.
Never forget that God's promotions often begin with painful separations.
Joseph had to leave the pit before he reached the palace. David had to spend time in lonely fields before he wore a crown. Moses had to leave Egypt before he fulfilled his calling. Even Jesus experienced rejection before the resurrection revealed his glory. If rejection was part of their journey, don't be surprised when it becomes part of yours. Rejection is not proof that God has forgotten you. Many times it is proof that He is preparing you for an assignment too great to remain where you are. The people who rejected you were never strong enough to stop God's plan. In fact, without realizing it, they helped fulfill it. Every closed door pushed you toward the door that was always meant for you. Every disappointment moved you closer to divine appointment. Every painful ending became the beginning of something greater.
So walk forward without fear.
Stop looking back at people who couldn't see what heaven saw in you. Keep your heart pure, your faith strong, and your eyes fixed on God. The rejection you experienced was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of your promotion. God has been preparing a place where your gifts will be recognized, your character will be honored, and your purpose will flourish. You don't have to force your way into rooms where you are merely tolerated, because the Lord is opening doors where you will be welcomed with joy. Your future is not defined by the people who let you go. It is defined by the God who never will. Stay faithful, chosen one. The same God who carried you through rejection is now leading you into a season of favor, restoration, and divine elevation that no person can stop. Your greatest days are not behind you, they are still unfolding, and everything you endured is about to make perfect sense in the light of God's incredible plan for your life.